Last winter, damage to a telecommunications cable between Finland and Estonia was detected, and Finnish authorities looked at maritime traffic in the area and found one ship that stood out.
Right now, over 99% of all international internet traffic, your video calls, your bank transfers, entire national intelligence networks, is traveling through cables roughly as thick as a garden hose, lying exposed on the floor of the ocean. There's no cloud, there's no satellite doing the heavy lifting. There's a few hundred fragile fiber optic lines, some of them decades old, sitting on the seabed where almost anyone with a boat and an anchor can reach them. And since 2022, they've been getting cut, deliberately, according to multiple governments, off the coast of Taiwan, in the Baltic Sea, again and again and again, with the ships responsible traced back to Russia and China more times than any coincidence should allow. This is the story of the most important infrastructure most people have never thought about once in their lives, and why it's quietly become one of the most contested battlegrounds on Earth. Most people assume the internet lives in the sky, satellites, wireless signals, the cloud. In reality, the cloud has a floor, and it's the bottom of the ocean. Roughly 500 submarine cables currently crisscross the seafloor, carrying the vast majority of intercontinental data traffic, including nearly all international financial transactions. These cables aren't buried in some armored trench. In shallow water near coastlines, they're sometimes lightly buried, but across most of the open ocean, they simply rest on the seabed, protected mainly by depth, remoteness, and the assumption that nobody would bother. That assumption made sense for decades. It stopped making sense around 2022, the same year Russia invaded Ukraine, and the same year incidents involving these cables started climbing sharply in two very specific regions of the world, the Baltic Sea and the waters around Taiwan. Quick pause before we get into the incidents themselves. My team spent weeks going through incident reports, court filings, and maritime tracking data for this one, and talking to people who follow this industry closely, because a story this quietly serious deserved more than a headline. If you want to see more research like this, hitting subscribe genuinely helps make it possible. All right, back to it. Start in the Baltic. Since 2022, roughly 10 subsea cables connecting the region have been cut, with 7 of those breaks happening in just a 3-month span between November 2024 and January 2025. On November 17, 2024, a cable connecting Sweden and Lithuania was severed. Less than 24 hours later, a separate cable connecting Finland and Germany went down too. Tracking data placed a Chinese-flagged vessel, the Yipeng 3, at the exact time and location of both breaks. On Christmas Day 2024, it happened again. An undersea power cable and 4 telecom lines between Finland and Estonia were cut. Finnish authorities seized the tanker responsible, the Eagle S, and said it was part of a shadow fleet being used to circumvent sanctions on Russian oil. Finland's president at the time put it bluntly, 3 cases in 1 year cannot be a coincidence. In response, NATO launched an operation called Baltic Sentry in January 2025, deploying frigates, patrol aircraft, and naval drones specifically to guard undersea infrastructure. And still, the incidents haven't stopped. As recently as New Year's Eve 2025, Finnish police seized yet another vessel, sailing from Russia toward Israel on suspicion of dragging its anchor across a telecoms cable in the Gulf of Finland. Now look at the other hot zone, and the pattern gets harder to write off as coincidence. Since 2023, Taiwanese and European authorities have logged at least 11 separate cases of undersea cable damage around Taiwan, almost matching the Baltic exactly, incident for incident. In January 2025, Taiwan's Coast Guard intercepted a Hong Kong-owned freighter, the Xingshun 39, after it was linked to a damaged cable near Taiwan's northern coast. Weeks later, a separate vessel, the Hong Tai 58, was boarded on suspicion of cutting another cable near the Penghu Islands. Analysts have also tracked a Russian-operated cargo vessel, the Vasily Shukshin, that spent 3.5 weeks in December 2024 and January 2025 slowly crisscrossing the waters near a Taiwanese cable landing station for no apparent commercial reason at all, before quietly returning to a Russian port. That detail matters because it points towards something bigger than isolated incidents, growing evidence of coordination between Chinese and Russian vessels, specifically around cable reconnaissance and sabotage. The same tactics used in the Baltic, now being rehearsed in the waters that connect Taiwan to the rest of the world. Taiwan's own defense minister has since called this what it looks like. Not a string of accidents, but a form of gray zone warfare, pressure applied just short of an actual attack, deniable but relentless. Here's what makes this such an effective form of pressure. It's almost impossible to prove intent. A dragged anchor looks the same on radar whether it was an accident or a deliberate act, and several suspected saboteurs have walked free specifically because prosecutors couldn't prove intent beyond reasonable doubt. And even when a cable is confirmed cut, fixing it isn't fast. Repairing a subsea cable requires a specialized ship, favorable weather, and often a waiting period, since there are only a limited number of cable repair vessels in the entire world. Which means this tactic doesn't need to sink a ship or fire a shot to work. It just needs to keep happening often enough, and ambiguously enough, that nobody can ever quite call it an act of war, while still reminding everyone downstream exactly how fragile the connection really is. We like to think of the internet as something that exists everywhere and nowhere, untouchable, abstract, in the cloud. It isn't. It runs through a few hundred physical lines on the bottom of the ocean, and right now, multiple governments are quietly testing how much they can cut without starting a war. This is a story that's still unfolding in real time, in two of the most tense regions on the planet. And I'll be following it. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.